Hello, everyone, and welcome to NASA's training on the 2024 NASA Grant and Cooperative Agreement Manual, or GCAM. My name is Chris Morgia, and I am a Senior Analyst in NASA's Office of Procurement and Grants Policy Division. As some of you may know, NASA released significant revisions to the GCAM in October 2024 to effectuate new policies and requirements. This training will provide an overview of the revisions and what they mean for NASA's Grant and Cooperative Agreement applicants and recipients. Before we begin, I'll note that NASA has published additional grants-related trainings on its YouTube grants playlist that cover topics such as applying for a NASA award, the uniform guidance, and award closeout. So let's get started. This training is divided into two sections. The first section provides an introduction to the GCAM, and we'll explore what the GCAM is, how it's organized, and why NASA made significant revisions in 2024. The second section provides a chapter-by-chapter review of major revisions to the 2024 GCAM. First, let's get to know the GCAM a bit better. So what is the GCAM? The GCAM is NASA's primary grants policy document for applicants and recipients. The GCAM provides a concise, practical guide that addresses grant management activities across the pre-award, award, post-award, and closeout phases of the grant lifecycle. The GCAM also outlines applicant and recipient roles and responsibilities as well as requirements that entities must follow. The revisions that NASA published to the 2024 GCAM apply to all new and amended grants and cooperative agreements issued on or after October 1, 2024. The GCAM consists of an introduction, 5 chapters, and several appendices. The introduction outlines general guidance and policy requirements, such as the GCAM's applicability, and the 5 chapters are organized around the phases of the grant lifecycle in the single audit process. As a reminder, the pre-award phase is when NASA solicits proposals, the public submits proposals, and NASA conducts proposal evaluations. During the award phase, NASA grant officers conduct additional analyses, assemble award packages, and issue awards. During the post-award phase, recipients are drawing down funds and implementing their project while NASA monitors performance. Finally, during the closeout phase, recipients are submitting final reports and liquidating obligations while NASA is making final payments as necessary and ensuring that all final reports have been submitted. The GCAM is developed and maintained by NASA's Office of Procurement, specifically the Grants Policy and Compliance Team, or GPC. The 2024 GCAM revisions fall into 4 categories. First, the GCAM was revised to incorporate all contents of the NASA's Proposer's Guide. Second, revisions were made to effectuate the Office of Management and Budget's 2024 revisions to 2 CFR. Third, NASA updated guidance to comply with various statutory, regulatory, or policy requirements, such as those in National Security Presidential Memorandum 33. Lastly, NASA made revisions throughout the GCAM to improve its flow, structure, and formatting. Prior to October 1, 2024, NASA's guidance for grant applicants could be found in the Proposer's Guide. However, this meant that NASA maintained 2 grant policy documents with which the public had to familiarize themselves, those being the Proposer's Guide and the GCAM. To streamline policy and create a single document that addresses all phases of the life cycle, NASA incorporated the Proposer's Guide into the 2024 edition of the GCAM. The contents of the Proposer's Guide can now be found in GCAM Chapter 1 Pre-Award. As of October 1st, 2024, the Proposer's Guide no longer exists and has been archived. All applicants and recipients should consult the GCAM moving forward. For those interested, old versions of the Proposer's Guide can still be viewed on GPC's website. Besides incorporating the Proposer's Guide into the GCAM, another major driver of revisions was OMB's revisions in Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, or 2 CFR. In April 2024, OMB released top-to-bottom revisions to 2 CFR that included plain language revisions, improvements to flow and structure, reductions to agency and recipient burden, and the incorporation of statutory and administrative priorities and clarifications to guidance that has historically been misinterpreted. NASA adopted the OMB's 2024 revisions to 2 CFR, and the revisions to 2 CFR apply to all new and amended NASA awards issued on or after October 1, 2024. Now, let's take a deeper dive into specific revisions that NASA made to the 2024 GCAM. We'll start with an overview of general revisions or revisions that impact the entire GCAM. Throughout the GCAM, NASA has revised terminology to align the document to OMB's revisions to terminology in 2 CFR. For example, Federal Awarding Agency is now Federal Agency, and non-federal entity is either recipient or subrecipient, where applicable. The table on the left of the screen outlines the major revisions to terminology that you will see throughout the 2024 GCAM. NASA also added new definitions to the GCAM to clarify existing policy and align the document to new requirements. For example, the 2024 2 CFR revisions include a new definition for participant. So NASA has added this definition of participant to the GCAM to clarify our participant support cost policy. Additionally, the CHIPS and Science Act included a definition for malign foreign talent recruitment programs, or MFTRPs, so NASA has added a definition of MFTRP to the 2024 GCAM. The table on the right side of the screen outlines all new definitions that you'll see in the 2024 edition of the Grant and Cooperative Agreement Manual. Several sections throughout the GCAM have been revised to incorporate previously issued Grant Information Circulars, or GICs. NASA typically updates the GCAM every 2 years. However, we may need to issue new guidance outside of this regular GCAM revision process, and we do that by issuing a GIC. In 2024, GICs added to the GCAM include those pertaining to the recipient integrity and performance matters term and condition, a GIC regarding the transition of FAPIS into SAM.gov, and NASA's transition from the Federal Cash Transaction Report to the Federal Financial Report. So these are not new policies per se, they're just new to the GCAM this year. For example, our GIC on NASA's new conflict of interest policy was issued back in August 2023, so it has been effective for some time. However, with the 2024 revisions to the GCAM, that conflict of interest policy now appears in the GCAM as well. The GCAM's introduction section contains a new order of precedence section, section 2.2. The purpose of the order of precedence is to clarify which policies should be followed in the event of a conflict between an award's terms and conditions and other requirements. The order of precedence is as follows. First, it is the U.S. Code as applicable. Then it's 2 CFR. After that, it's an award's terms and conditions. After the terms and conditions, it is chapters 2 through 5 of the GCAM, followed by requirements in a NASA Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO. Finally, is followed by chapter 1 of the GCAM. GCAM chapter 1 provides pre-award guidance, but NASA's program offices in certain cases have the ability to place program-specific requirements in their NOFO that may differ from GCAM chapter 1. That's why NOFOs take precedence over GCAM chapter 1. NASA has clarified grant and cooperative agreement eligibility requirements in GCAM Section 4 limitations. We have clarified that NASA centers, NASA civil servants, NASA facilities, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, cannot be recipients or subrecipients of a NASA grant or cooperative agreement. This does not mean that recipients cannot partner with these NASA entities. It just means that these NASA entities cannot receive financial assistance funding from NASA. In this section, we'll take a look at major revisions to GCAM Chapter 1, which covers the pre-award phase of the grant lifecycle. As previously mentioned, the Proposer's Guide has been fully integrated into the 2024 GCAM. We essentially took the contents of the Proposer's Guide and turned it into GCAM Chapter 1, so everything that you used to find in the Proposer's Guide can now be found in the GCAM. For those applying for a NASA grant or cooperative agreement, GCAM Chapter 1 will tell you about required proposal documents, how to submit a proposal, how to register in our grant proposal system, Inspires, and how we evaluate proposals. This year, we've added 2 new sections to the GCAM to implement biographical sketch and current and pending support disclosure requirements found in National Security Presidential Memorandum 33 or NSPM 33. Earlier this year, the Office of Management and Budget approved common biosketch and current and pending support disclosure forms for federal agencies' use in support of those NSPM 33 requirements, and NASA has adopted those forms. Effective October 1, 2024, all covered individuals must submit a biosketch and current and pending support form with their application. And NASA is defining covered individual as any principal investigator, regardless of their level of effort, any co-principal investigator, regardless of their level of effort, and any co-investigator that propose to spend 10% or more of their time on a NASA award. We have also published a table called the NASA Pre-Award and Post-Award Disclosure Requirements, which describes all activities that covered individuals must disclose on their forms. It is also important to note that in addition to the disclosures, covered individuals must sign a certification on the forms stating that the disclosures are current, accurate, and complete. For more information on the disclosure forms, I recommend checking out NASA's training video on the new disclosure requirements, which can be found on the same NASA YouTube playlist as this GCAM video. Another revision to the GCAM's pre-award chapter is clarification about when the NASA Form 1206 must be submitted. The NF 1206 documents applicants' attestation that they will comply with various laws and policies prohibiting discrimination, such as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. We've clarified that the NF 1206 is due at application if requested by a NASA grant officer, and then every 3 years thereafter. The 1206 does not have to be submitted with each application. As long as NASA has a valid copy of the 1206 on file, a grant officer will not reach out to your entity. However, if NASA has never received a 1206 from your entity, or the 1206 on file is older than 3 years, then a NASA grant officer will reach out to your entity for the form. The GCAM has a new section on Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, policy. We've clarified that applicant, recipient, and subrecipient records provided to NASA may be subject to FOIA requests. This revision stems from new language in 2 CFR section 200.338, which OMB updated to clarify that FOIA may apply to subrecipient records submitted to federal agencies. We have also updated our FOIA policy to state that if applicant or recipient records are subject to a FOIA request, NASA may contact the recipient to determine if any of the information is exempt from FOIA, such as information on trade secrets. The GCAM has a new section regarding the prohibition on award recipients participating in malign foreign talent recruitment programs, or MFTRPs. The CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 prohibits covered individuals from participating in federally funded research projects if they are a party to a MFTRP, and the Act contains 2 new attestation requirements. First, covered individuals must certify that they are not a party to a MFTRP. In this case, NASA is defining covered individuals in the exact same way that we do it under the biosketch and current pending support disclosure policy. So it's all principal investigators, all co-principal investigators, and any co-investigator that's spending 10% or more of their time on a NASA award. When submitting an application, covered individuals will sign a certification on the biosketch and current and pending support forms regarding the MFTRP prohibition. This individual certification is also required annually, and post-award, NASA is requiring individuals to submit certifications to their institution and institutions must then make those certifications available to NASA upon request. In addition to the individual certification, institutions' authorized organizational representatives, or AORs, must certify at application that covered individuals have been made aware of and have complied with the MFTRP prohibition. AOR's certifications are submitted in NASA's proposal intake system, INSPIRES. NASA has also updated our certification regarding bilateral cooperation with the People's Republic of China. In compliance with NASA's annual appropriations bill, applicants must attest that they are not participating, collaborating, or coordinating bilaterally with China or any Chinese-owned company. However, this restriction can be waived if NASA submits a certification to Congress in accordance with requirements in our appropriations bill. And NASA has done just that so that NASA-funded researchers may apply for access to China's Chang'e 5 lunar samples. Given that some NASA-funded researchers may cooperate bilaterally with China to obtain these lunar samples, we have had to revise our certification language to reflect this exemption. So now the certification states that proposers shall not coordinate bilaterally with China unless NASA has notified that proposer that NASA has sought a waiver for such activities. It's important to note here that bilateral coordination with China under a NASA award is only allowable if a proposer has received this notification from NASA. In addition to the new MFTRP certification and revised China certification, NASA has also added a new certification regarding trafficking in persons. This new certification comes from OMB's revisions to 2 CFR 175, titled Award Term for Trafficking in Persons. AWARs are now required to certify that 1. They have implemented a plan to prevent trafficking in persons in accordance with 2 CFR 175. 2. They have implemented procedures to monitor, detect, and terminate subrecipients, contractors, subcontractors, and employees engaged in trafficking. And 3. To the best of the recipient's knowledge, neither the recipient nor any subrecipient, contractor, or subcontractor is engaged in trafficking. AORs will sign this certification at application in INSPIRES and annually thereafter. In this section, we will review major revisions to GCAM Chapter 2, which covers the award phase of the life cycle. NASA has made revisions to GCAM Section 22, Indirect Costs, to clarify existing guidance. First, we revised the section to clarify that there is no universal rule for classifying costs as either direct or indirect. However, it's important to keep in mind that costs incurred for the same purpose in like circumstances must be treated consistently. In a few cases, 2 CFR 200 does explicitly state that specific costs may only be charged to an award as either a direct or indirect cost. For example, bonding costs can only be charged as indirect costs, while equipment can only be charged as direct. If you're in doubt about how to charge a cost to an award, consult the cost principles in 2 CFR 200 Subpart E, or reach out to your NASA grant officer for assistance. NASA has clarified and expanded our guidance regarding equipment inventory reporting. As a reminder, NASA recipients that are nonprofit institutions of higher education or nonprofits whose primary purpose is scientific research are exempt from annual equipment inventory reporting. However, if your entity is not exempt, then an annual equipment report is required. We have updated the 2024 GCAM to clarify that equipment reports must be submitted in the NASA Electronic Submission System, or NES, and that recipients may contact their NASA Center Industrial Property Officer if known, or their grant officer to obtain access to NES. Equipment inventory submissions may be submitted in NES each year between October 1st and October 31st. Another significant change that NASA has made to the GCAM this year is the removal of our terms and conditions from the document. In the past, NASA awarded terms and conditions could be found as an appendix in the GCAM. However, to facilitate navigation to the document and allow NASA to more easily archive older versions of our terms and conditions, we have removed the terms and conditions from the GCAM and made the terms and conditions a standalone document. The standalone terms and conditions document, which we are now calling the Grant and Cooperative Agreement Terms and Conditions, or GCAT, can be found on the NASA Grants Policy and Compliance website. For those interested in further training on our new terms and conditions, please check out the NASA YouTube Grants playlist for a video that specifically focuses on the new GCAT. In this section, we'll review major revisions to GCAM Chapter 3, which covers the post-award phase of the grants lifecycle. NASA has revised the language in GCAM Section 29.1, Performance Report Requirements, to clarify when performance reports must be submitted. Previously, the GCAM stated that performance reports were due 60 days prior to an award's anniversary date, which some interpreted as 60 days prior to an award's period of performance start date anniversary, or 60 days prior to the anniversary date of the grant officer issuing the award. Guidance has been clarified to state that performance reports are due 60 days prior to the annual anniversary date of the award's period of performance. So, for example, if an award has a period of performance of October 1 through September 30th, then annual reports would be due 60 days prior to October 1 of each year, which in this case is August 1st. As previously mentioned, the contents of several Grant Information Circulars, or GICs, have been incorporated into the GCAM this year. One of those GICs is GIC 23-07, which communicates NASA's new Conflict of Interest Disclosure Policy. In summary, the Conflict of Interest Policy requires that institutions collect disclosures of significant financial interests from investigators and determine if a conflict of interest exists prior to expending award funds. If a conflict of interest does exist, then the institution must take action to either eliminate, manage, or reduce that conflict of interest. If for any reason the institution cannot eliminate, manage, or reduce the conflict of interest, then that conflict must be disclosed to NASA, and those disclosures are made to your cognizant NASA grants officer. Again, this policy is not new. It was initially published in August 2023, but it is new to the GCAM for 2024. So I previously described new biosketch and current and pending support disclosures that must be submitted at application. In addition to those disclosures at application, there are post-award biosketch and current and pending support disclosures that must also be made. After award receipt, covered individuals must indicate new reportable activities in the first performance report due to NASA after the activity was disclosed to their institution. So individuals will notate in their research performance progress report that there is some sort of new reportable activity. Then, along with their performance report, the individual will prepare, certify, and submit a revised disclosure form that reflects the new activity. So the performance report will say, yes, there is some new activity that I need to disclose, and the updated form will tell us specifically what that activity is. In addition to post-award biosketch and current and pending support disclosures, there's also a new requirement to disclose information related to criminal law violations. OMB revised 2 CFR Section 200.113 mandatory disclosures to require that credible evidence of the commission of a violation of federal criminal law involving fraud, conflict of interest, bribery, or gratuity violations be disclosed. This information must be disclosed to NASA and the NASA Office of Inspector General, or OIG. Subrecipients must report this information to their pass-through entity. The table on this chart compares previous language in 2 CFR Section 200.113 with the new language in that same section. Note that OMB has revised their language to require the disclosure of credible evidence of the commission of a violation, which is new for 2024. There are cases in which a principal investigator transfers to a new institution and would like their NASA grant or cooperative agreement to follow them to that new institution. In most cases, NASA will work with the institution and PI to transfer that award to that new institution. However, to ensure recipients are obtaining proper prior approvals before transferring, NASA has instituted new limitations on PI transfer requests in the 2024 GCAM. The first limitation is that PI transfer requests must be submitted to NASA while the PI is still at their relinquishing organization, which is the original award recipient. If a PI transfers to a new institution and then requests that their award be transferred, NASA will not honor that request. The second limitation is that NASA will not process a PI transfer request if it is made within the last 90 days of the original award's period of performance. This limitation is necessary to ensure that NASA and the relinquishing organization have adequate time to process the PI transfer request before the original award expires. NASA has also clarified guidance regarding no-cost extension requests. There are now essentially 3 different no-cost extension deadlines with which recipients should be familiar. The first pertains to the recipient-initiated no-cost extensions authorized by 2 CFR Section 200.308. These recipient-initiated extension requests must be submitted to NASA at least 10 calendar days before a period of performance expires. After that, subsequent no-cost extension requests must be submitted to NASA at least 45 calendar days before a POP expires. However, if a subsequent no-cost extension request will result in an award exceeding a total amount of $5 million and a period of performance exceeding 5 years, then that extension request must be submitted to NASA at least 90 calendar days before the POP expires. It's important to note here the use of the word "and" regarding awards that exceed $5 million and exceed a 5-year period of performance. An award has to both exceed $5 million and a 5-year POP in order to be subject to that 90 calendar day request deadline. In this section, we'll review major revisions to GCAM Chapter 4, which pertains to the closeout phase of the grant's life cycle. In 2024, OMB revised 2 CFR Section 200.344 Closeout to clarify that recipients without a final indirect cost rate covering their award's period of performance are still required to submit a final financial report. This allows agencies to close out awards in a timely manner. Additionally, once the indirect cost rates have been finalized, recipients must submit a revised final financial report. These revisions to 2 CFR have been incorporated into GCAM Section 37, Closeout Responsibilities. As a reminder, NASA requires that recipients submit their federal financial reports, also known as the SF-425, in the HHS Payment Management System, or PMS. For 2 CFR Section 200.344B, recipients must submit all final reports no later than 120 calendar days after the conclusion of an award's period of performance. NASA may provide extensions to this reporting deadline, and the GCAM has been updated to clarify how those extension requests must be submitted. If a recipient requires a final report deadline extension, then they must submit a written request to their cognizant NASA grant officer requesting and justifying the deadline extension. NASA will then review the extension request and make a determination accordingly. In addition to the requirement to submit final reports no later than 120 calendar days after the conclusion of an award's POP, recipients must also liquidate all financial obligations during this 120-day period. NASA may also grant extensions for this requirement, and the 2024 GCAM has been updated to describe how those extension requests must be submitted. If a recipient requires more time to liquidate all financial obligations, then they must submit a written request to their NASA grant officer requesting an extension to this particular requirement. Recipients should not submit, and NASA will not approve, no-cost extension requests for the sole purposes of providing more time for recipients to liquidate financial obligations. In other words, recipients should request extensions to the requirement found at 2 CFR 200.344C rather than requesting a POP extension. The 2024 GCAM has been updated to reflect new flexibilities regarding closeout costs. In 2024, OMB revised 2 CFR section 200.403, factors affecting allowability of costs, to allow recipients to incur administrative closeout costs during the 120-day closeout period. Prior to this revision, recipients were prohibited from incurring new costs during the 120-day period. GCAM Section 37 has been updated to reflect this new cost allowability. However, NASA has also noted in the GCAM that despite this allowance, recipients are still responsible for also liquidating all financial obligations and submitting final reports within the 120-day closeout period. To ensure timely award closeout, NASA has updated its timeframe for unilateral award closeout. Unilateral closeout occurs when a recipient fails to comply with award closeout requirements, such as submitting final reports within the 120-day closeout period, and it is a process by which NASA closes out an award without a recipient's final report. In the past, NASA would initiate the unilateral closeout process if a recipient had not satisfied closeout responsibilities within 270 days of an award's POP expiring. That timeframe has now been moved up to 245 days so that NASA can meet requirements in 2 CFR 200 that require agencies to make every effort to close out awards no later than 1 year after a POP ends. We've reached the final section of our training, which covers GCAM Chapter 5, Single Audits. The 2024 edition of the GCAM contains a new single audit chapter that describes single audit requirements and single audit roles and responsibilities. GCAM Section 38, Single Audit Requirements, describes the requirement that any recipient or subrecipient expending $1 million or more in federal award funds in its fiscal year obtain a single audit. In the past, the thresholds for single audits was $750,000, but OMB raised that limit to $1 million when they revised 2 CFR in 2024. Recipients expending less than $1 million in federal award funds in their fiscal year are exempt from the single audit requirements. For more on single audit requirements, please see 2 CFR 200, subpart F. NASA has also added a new section to the GCAM that describes recipient and NASA responsibilities related to single audits. In summary, recipients that meet the $1 million single audit threshold are required to arrange for audit services, prepare financial statements for auditors, take corrective action on any audit findings, and submit their single audit reports to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. NASA's responsibilities include monitoring single audit reports in the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, determining if recipients' corrective actions are sufficient, issuing management decision letters for any audit findings related to NASA awards, and, if necessary, make determinations on recipients' requests to extend single audit report submission deadlines. That concludes our overview of the major revisions to the 2024 NASA Grant and Cooperative Agreement Manual. To summarize what we covered today, the GCAM was revised in 2024 to incorporate the contents of the Proposer's Guide, to reflect OMB's 2024 revisions to 2 CFR, and incorporate other statutory, regulatory, and policy requirements. The requirements in the 2024 GCAM apply to all new and amended awards issued on or after October 1, 2024, regardless of when a NOFO may have been issued. The GCAM is now organized into chapters that correspond to phases of the grant lifecycle, and there is a new chapter that focuses on the single audit process. Before we go, I will leave you with a list of helpful resources. On this slide, you can find links to everything from the 2024 GCAM, the new disclosure forms, and even links to a redline version of OMB's 2024 revisions to 2 CFR. We hope that you found this training helpful, and please be sure to check out our other grants-related training videos on the NASA YouTube Grants playlist. Thank you very much.